It wasn't the kind of suspicion that hits you all at once. No, this was something that grew quietly, like a storm on the horizon that you don't notice until the first raindrop lands on your cheek. At first, I told myself it was just my imagination. Lisa had been working late, spending weekends running errands, and, on more than one occasion, her phone had buzzed with messages she'd glance at and dismiss far too quickly. She'd laugh it off when I asked, saying, "Oh, just group chats," her tone light, her smile brittle. But I wasn't blind, or deaf. Every time she climbed into bed beside me, her scent carried something unfamiliar, an essence that wasn't hers. Not her usual lavender and vanilla body lotion, but something sharper, muskier, like cologne. The kind of scent no amount of detergent could hide from our sheets. The first time I mentioned it, I was cautious, almost playful. "New laundry detergent?" I joked. Lisa's face twitched, a momentary flicker of something between confusion and discomfort. Then she laughed, a hollow sound that didn't belong in our bedroom. "You're imagining things," she said, brushing it off like a stray hair. But I wasn't imagining it. Over time, her behavior grew more erratic. She'd leave for hours without saying where she was going, claiming vague excuses like meeting an old friend or just some work stuff. Conversations between us became clipped, transactional, and the warmth in her eyes, the one that used to anchor me on my worst days, was gone. Instead, I saw something distant, as though her heart was elsewhere, and I was just the guy who happened to share her house. One night, I decided to follow her. She said she was meeting up with her book club, an odd excuse, considering I'd never seen her read anything more substantial than a menu. I waited for the soft click of the front door, peered out the window, and watched her pull away in her car. My chest tightened as I grabbed my jacket and keys. Her taillights disappeared down the road, and I hung back, careful to stay out of sight. She drove across town, stopping at a small bistro on the edge of the city. I parked a block away and approached cautiously, staying close to the shadows. Through the restaurant's large windows, I saw her seated at a corner table. She wasn't alone. A man sat across from her, leaning in too close. He had the kind of self-assured smirk that made my blood boil. Lisa was laughing, her hand brushing his arm in a way that didn't belong to the woman I thought I knew. I couldn't hear them, but their body language said everything. I should have stormed in. I should have demanded answers. But something held me back. Fear, maybe, or the faint hope that I was wrong. Instead, I left, my thoughts a hurricane of betrayal and doubt. When I confronted her later that night, my words were measured. "How was book club?" Her eyes flicked to mine, her smile tight. "Fine," she said, turning away before I could gauge her reaction. "Fine." The lie hung in the air between us, as suffocating as the unspoken truth. That night, I slept on the couch, though sleep was a generous word for the hours I spent staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction, every moment that felt off. When had it started? Was there something I'd missed? Or worse, something I'd ignored? The days that followed were unbearable. Lisa grew colder, more secretive. Each time her phone buzzed, my chest tightened. And then there was the bed. The faint scent of someone else lingered, a cruel reminder that I wasn't imagining things. She must have thought I didn't notice, or worse, that I wouldn't care enough to say something. I started watching her more closely, noticing the small cracks in her facade. How her hands trembled when she thought I wasn't looking. How her laugh had taken on a nervous edge. And then, one night, I found it, the piece of evidence I'd been dreading. It was a receipt, tucked carelessly into her purse. A hotel. Room service for two. The date matched a night she'd told me she was working late. My hands shook as I held it, my pulse roaring in my ears. This wasn't paranoia anymore. It wasn't just a scent on the sheets or a suspicious glance. This was proof. But instead of confronting her, I did something I didn't think I was capable of. I waited. I watched. I told myself that if she was going to betray me, I would catch her in the act. And when I did, she wouldn't be able to deny it. That night, lying awake beside her, I made a decision. I would follow her again, wherever she went. I would find out who he was, what she was hiding. Because if my marriage was going to shatter, I needed to know who was holding the hammer. I didn't sleep that night, not a wink. The house was silent, save for the faint creak of the old wooden beams. But inside my head, it was anything but. My thoughts clattered together like broken glass. What if I was wrong? What if I was right? The worst part wasn't the uncertainty. It was the waiting, the feeling of time slipping away while something vile, something irreparable, might be unfolding beneath my own roof. At some point, a terrible idea began to take shape in the fog of my sleepless mind. Catch her in the act. Not in a restaurant, not in some parking lot, but here, in the house we built together. I'd lure them in, give them the illusion of safety, and then tear it apart. But how? That's when it hit me. I'd pretend to leave. Disappear for a few days. Enough time for her to think the coast was clear. Lisa wasn't the type to wait. She couldn't help herself. Couldn't sit still when the opportunity to indulge came knocking. I'd tell her I was going to visit my grandfather, who she knew had been unwell. It was the perfect excuse. Out of town, unavailable, believable. But words alone wouldn't be enough. I needed proof, the kind no one could deny. And so the plan evolved. I'd set up cameras, hidden in plain sight, watching every room of the house. If she was going to invite him here, I'd see it. I'd hear it. I'd know everything. The first rays of dawn seeped through the curtains, and I realized it was Saturday, a gift really. No work to explain, no questions about where I'd be. I got up and dressed quietly, careful not to wake Lisa. She was still asleep, her face serene in a way that almost made me forget what I'd seen, what I suspected. Almost. Over coffee, I told her my plan. "Grandpa's not doing great," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I'm thinking of driving up to see him for a few days." She barely looked up from her phone. "That's a good idea," she said. "He'll appreciate it." There was no hesitation in her voice, no protest at the thought of me leaving. I searched her face for a flicker of guilt or relief, but she gave me nothing. I grabbed my jacket and left the house, but I didn't go far. The store was my first stop. I walked the aisles, scanning rows of security equipment, my heart pounding as I imagined how this would all play out. The cameras I chose weren't just discreet. They were top of the line, the kind you'd see in a spy movie. Tiny, nearly invisible, and equipped with live streaming capabilities. They were expensive, but this wasn't the time to cut corners. With the cameras in hand, I drove back home. The driveway was empty, just as I'd expected. Lisa had already left, off to some errand or engagement she wouldn't bother explaining. Good. I needed time. Installing the cameras was easier than I'd thought. I worked quickly, but carefully, hiding each device where it wouldn't be noticed. A corner of the living room, the bedroom, the kitchen, every space where they might think they had privacy. I even placed one in the bathroom, though the thought made me queasy. This wasn't about comfort or morality anymore. It was about truth. By the time I finished, the house felt different. The same walls, the same furniture, but now it held secrets of its own. Secrets that soon I'd share. I barely had time to test the setup before I heard her car pull into the driveway. My pulse quickened, and I moved to the back door, slipping out just as she entered. The air outside was crisp, biting at my skin as I hurried to my car. I parked around the corner, where I'd be out of sight, and pulled up the app on my phone. The cameras connected instantly, streaming live footage from inside the house. There she was. Lisa walked into the kitchen, her purse slung over her shoulder. She looked around, her eyes scanning the room. For a moment, I wondered if she suspected something, if she could feel the invisible eyes watching her. But then she shrugged, grabbed a glass of water, and moved into the living room. Her movements were casual, unhurried, as though she had all the time in the world. I sat in the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel, watching her every move. The waiting was unbearable. Would she call him? Invite him over? Or was I wrong after all, chasing shadows where there was nothing but my own insecurity? And then she picked up her phone. Her expression changed, lighter, almost eager. She paced as she spoke, her voice too faint to hear through the feed, but her body language said everything. She was smiling, her free hand gesturing as she talked. My stomach churned. She ended the call and set the phone down, her face flushed with something that wasn't the cool indifference I'd grown used to. She moved through the house, tidying things, fluffing pillows, adjusting the curtains, preparing. My phone buzzed with a text from her. Hope Grandpa feels better. Love you. The words felt like poison, twisting in my chest. I typed out a quick reply, something neutral, and set the phone down. My plan was working. Now all I had to do was wait. I didn't stay in that place because I was afraid my wife would see me, so I went to the hotel. The hotel was small, tucked into a quiet side street less than 15 minutes from my house. Perfect. Close enough to keep an eye on things, far enough that Lisa wouldn't stumble across me by accident. The receptionist barely glanced at me as I checked in, handing me a key card and murmuring something about complimentary breakfast. I wasn't listening. My mind was already on the cameras. Inside the room, I dropped my bag on the bed and pulled out my phone. The app loaded quickly, the live feeds popping up one by one. My house, my sanctuary, was now a digital stage. The living room camera showed the couch, empty except for a throw pillow Lisa had tossed aside. The kitchen feed captured a tidy countertop, no signs of life. The bedroom was perfectly still, save for the faint ripple of curtains moving in the breeze from the cracked window. I exhaled, half relieved, half tense. Maybe I'd overestimated her. Maybe she wasn't brazen enough to invite him over the moment I was gone. But deep down, I knew better. Hours passed. I paced the room, my gaze flicking between the phone and the window. I thought about turning on the TV, but the idea of anything drowning out the sounds I might need to hear made my stomach turn. Finally, I decided to call her. If she knew I was watching, she'd play it cool. If she didn't, maybe I could catch a crack in her story. The phone rang twice before she picked up. "Hey, honey," she said, her voice bright warm. Too warm. "Hey," I replied, keeping my tone casual. "How's it going?" "Good, good," she said quickly. "I was just tidying up a bit. Keeping busy." "How's Grandpa?" I paused for just a second, crafting my response. "He's sleeping," I said. "He's really sick, Lisa. I'll probably stay here for a few days at least. Make sure he's comfortable." "Oh," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "Well, give him my love. He's lucky to have you there." "Thanks," I muttered. "What about you? What are you up to tonight?" She hesitated, just long enough for my stomach to tighten. "Oh, nothing much," she said lightly. "I'm waiting for a friend to come over. We're just going to watch a movie. Relax." My grip on the phone tightened. "Friend." The word clanged in my ears like a warning bell. "Who's coming over?" I asked, my tone steady despite the pulse hammering in my chest. She laughed softly, like I'd asked about the weather. "Oh, just Melissa. You don't know her. She's from work." "Melissa. Work." Lies, layered so neatly I almost admired them. "That's nice," I said evenly. "Well, don't let me keep you. Have a good night." "You too," she replied. "Good night, sweetheart." And then it happened. A knock at the door. "Oh, that must be her now," Lisa said hurriedly. "Gotta go. Love you." The line went dead, and I stared at my phone for a long second, the silence in the room deafening. My fingers moved automatically, switching to the camera feeds. There she was, walking to the door. My heart pounded as I watched her open it, revealing the man I'd seen before, the one from the bistro. He was tall, dark-skinned, dressed in a tailored suit that looked like it cost more than my monthly salary. Lisa didn't waste a moment. She leaned up and kissed him, her arms sliding around his neck. My stomach turned, a cold, hollow ache spreading through my chest. "Your husband has a good job, I see," the man said as he stepped inside, his voice rich and smooth, carrying a note of amused disdain. "This house, 3 stories? Impressive." Lisa laughed, low and soft. "He works hard," she replied. "But he's not here, so let's not talk about him." The man smirked, his gaze sweeping the room. "Nice place. Makes me wonder why you'd ever be bored." "Stop," Lisa said, playfully swatting his arm. "I've been waiting for you forever. Come on, let's go upstairs." My hands shook as I watched her lead him up the staircase, her laughter echoing faintly through the house. My house. Their voices faded as they disappeared into the bedroom, and I sat frozen, the weight of the moment pressing down on me like a boulder. I wanted to storm back home, kick down the door, and throw him out by the collar, but that wouldn't give me what I needed. Not yet. I needed to hear them, see them, let their betrayal seal itself in undeniable evidence. The feed from the bedroom camera came into view. Lisa and the man entered, her hand trailing along his chest as she spoke words I couldn't hear. He sat on the edge of the bed, unbuttoning his shirt, his expression smug. I couldn't look away. I couldn't stop watching as everything I'd built, everything I'd trusted, unraveled before me. I could barely breathe. The small hotel room felt like it was closing in, the walls pressing against me as I stared at my phone, unable to tear my eyes away from the scene unfolding on the screen. Lisa was back on the feed now, holding 2 glasses in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. Not just any wine, an expensive vintage we'd bought together for special occasions, one we joked about saving for our anniversary. She carried it like it meant nothing, just another prop for her performance. The man sat on the edge of the bed, his shirt unbuttoned halfway, a picture of smug confidence. Lisa handed him a glass and poured the wine, her smile wide and easy. It was the kind of smile I hadn't seen in months, the kind that once made me feel like the luckiest man in the world. They clinked glasses, laughing at some private joke as Lisa settled beside him. She leaned back, her body angled toward his, her bare legs tucked beneath her. They looked too comfortable, too at ease, and the knot in my chest tightened. They began to talk, their voices coming through the camera's audio feed, clear and damning. "So," the man said, his tone casual but probing, "when's your husband coming back?" Lisa let out a soft laugh, one that made my stomach churn. "Oh, don't worry about him. The fool ran off to take care of his sick grandfather." She rolled her eyes as if the idea of me caring for family was absurd. "He's gone for a few days at least. You can stay the night. No one's going to find us." The phone trembled in my hand, my knuckles whitening as I gripped it tighter. Her words were like acid, burning through every excuse I'd tried to make for her. The man smirked, swirling his wine. "You're sure?" "I'd hate to be caught with my pants down, so to speak." She laughed again, leaning in to brush his arm. "Trust me, you don't have to worry about him. He's too stupid to notice anything, even if he did come back early." "Stupid. Fool." Her words played in a loop in my head, each one hitting harder than the last. My jaw clenched so tightly it ached, and I felt an almost uncontrollable urge to hurl my phone across the room. "Still," the man pressed, his tone softening, "when are you going to tell him? That you hate him? That you love me?" Lisa's smile faltered for a moment, her gaze dropping to her glass. "I will," she said quietly, almost reluctantly. "But it's complicated." "Complicated?" the man repeated, his brow lifting. "What's complicated about it? You don't owe him anything." "I know," she murmured. "But I don't know. It's not the right time yet." "That's bullshit," the man said, his voice hardening. "You're just dragging this out. You don't want to be with him. But you can't let go of the life he's built for you. Can you?" Lisa glared at him, her tone sharp. "Don't start, okay? You don't understand." "Don't I?" he shot back. I screamed, the sound raw and guttural, echoing in the empty hotel room. My body trembled as rage coursed through me, every muscle in my body wound so tightly I thought I might snap. "You don't want to be with him, but you can't let go of the life he's built for you." The man's words rang in my ears, louder than my own thoughts. So that's what I was to her, a wallet, a means to an end. I paced the room, my breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. I wanted to go back, to throw open the door, drag him out of my house, and make her admit what she'd done. But I knew it was too soon. If I confronted them now, I'd have nothing but my rage. No proof, no plan, just the chaos they'd already created. On the screen, Lisa stood abruptly, brushing off his hand as he reached for her. "Wait a minute," she said. "I need to powder my nose." She slipped into the bathroom, her figure disappearing from the frame. I switched to the next camera and saw her enter, pulling a plush robe off the hook. She wrapped it around herself, tying the belt loosely at her waist. Her face was calm, almost serene, as she glanced at her reflection. She touched up her makeup, smoothing a hand over her hair. It was the face of a woman without shame, without guilt, a face that no longer resembled the woman I thought I married. I sat down heavily on the bed, my head in my hands. The anger, the humiliation, the disbelief, it all swirled together, drowning me in a storm I couldn't escape. This wasn't just betrayal. This was premeditated, calculated deceit. The life I'd built, the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd given, it all meant nothing to her. But I wasn't done yet. If Lisa thought she could destroy me, that she could tear apart our life and walk away unscathed, she was wrong. This wasn't over. The hotel room was stifling, the walls closing in as I stared at the screen. Lisa emerged from the bathroom, the loose robe slipping slightly off her shoulder as she walked toward the bed. She moved with a confidence that made me sick, a kind of careless ease, as if none of this mattered, as if I didn't matter. The man was waiting for her, his shirt already discarded, his grin smug and full of entitlement. Lisa climbed under the covers without hesitation, their laughter soft but audible, a private world unfolding in front of me. I told myself to stop watching, but my eyes wouldn't move. I was frozen, staring at the phone as they moved closer, their bodies entwined beneath the sheets. Clothes started to scatter across the floor, her robe, his trousers, a chaotic trail of betrayal that I couldn't unsee. It was more than I could bear. I slammed the phone down on the nightstand, my breath ragged, my pulse hammering in my ears. My hands were shaking as I reached for my jacket, my movements jerky and frantic. This is it, I muttered to myself. I've seen enough. I pulled on the jacket, yelling incoherently, the sound raw and animalistic. The room seemed to shrink around me, every surface mocking me with its sterile indifference. My hand shot out, grabbing the remote from the bed. Before I knew what I was doing, I hurled it at the TV. The screen shattered with a deafening crash, the shards scattering across the floor. But even that wasn't enough. My fists hit the walls, the desk, anything within reach, until my knuckles throbbed, blood smeared across the dull beige paint. I stormed out of the room, my chest heaving, my vision blurred with rage. The receptionist at the desk looked up, startled, but I didn't care. I didn't stop. My car keys were in my hand, and within moments, I was speeding out of the lot, my tires screeching against the asphalt. The drive home was a blur, my thoughts spiraling out of control. What should I do? What could I do? The betrayal had gutted me, leaving a hollow ache where my heart used to be. But the anger, the white-hot fury, was all-consuming. They'll regret this, I growled under my breath. They'll regret every damn second of it. But no matter how many ways I imagined my revenge, nothing seemed enough. Not for her lies, her mockery. Not for him. By the time I reached the house, I was seething, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. I parked the car down the street and walked the last few yards, my steps heavy and deliberate. The sight of the house, my house, our house, made my stomach turn. The door was locked. Of course it was. I gritted my teeth and pounded on it, the sound echoing into the quiet night. Open up, I roared, but there was no answer. My fist clenched, and I slammed it against the wood, over and over. The frame rattled, the hinges groaning under the pressure. By the fifth hit, the lock splintered, the door crashing open with a resounding crack. I stormed inside, the air thick with tension and the faint scent of perfume that wasn't mine. Footsteps echoed upstairs, hurried and frantic. They knew. I know everything. I bellowed, my voice reverberating through the house. I saw everything. I have recordings. Their panic was palpable, the sound of scrambling feet and muffled voices filling the silence. I climbed the stairs two at a time, my hands gripping the banister, so tightly my knuckles turned white. When I reached the bedroom, the door was ajar, and I pushed it open with a force that sent it slamming into the wall. There they were. Lisa stood by the bed, her face pale, her hair disheveled. She was wearing the same robe, hastily tied, but her hands trembled as she clutched it closed. The man was beside her, his shirt pulled on backward in his haste, his dark eyes wide with fear. They both looked at me like cornered animals, their bravado stripped away, leaving nothing but raw, exposed guilt. Daniel, Lisa started, her voice shaky, but I cut her off with a shout. Don't you dare, I snarled, stepping into the room. Don't you dare say my name. The man raised his hands, his voice a weak attempt at placation. Look, man, I didn't mean... You didn't mean what? I snapped, my gaze pinning him in place. Didn't want to sleep with my wife in my own house? Didn't want to laugh at me behind my back? He stammered, his confidence crumbling. And you, I said, turning to Lisa. My voice dropped, low and venomous. What do you have to say? Go on. Tell me how much of a fool I am. Say it to my face. Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't move me. Not this time. Daniel, I don't. I roared, my voice breaking with the weight of my anger and pain. You don't get to apologize. You don't get to explain. I watched you. I heard you. Every lie, every insult, everything. The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Lisa's tears spilled over, but she didn't move, didn't speak. The man beside her shifted uneasily, his eyes darting to the door as though he was considering running. But there was no escape, not for either of them. I took a step closer, my hands trembling at my sides. You both made a mistake, I said, my voice steady now, chilling. And I'm going to make damn sure you regret it. The sound of sirens cut through the tense silence, flashing red and blue lights bouncing off the walls through the broken front door. My stomach dropped as I realized what was happening. The neighbors must have called the police when they heard the shouting and the crash of the door. Before I could process it, uniformed officers stormed in, their voices sharp and commanding. Everyone on the ground, hands where we can see them. Lisa screamed, clutching her robe tightly, as if it could shield her from the chaos. The man stepped back, his hands in the air, his face pale with fear. I stayed where I was, frozen in a mix of anger and disbelief. It's my house, I yelled, my voice hoarse. They're the ones. On the ground, sir, an officer barked, cutting me off. Now. I raised my hands slowly, dropping to my knees. My rage bubbled just beneath the surface, but I knew better than to resist. They weren't here to hear my side of the story. Not yet. As they cuffed us, Lisa's voice rose, panicked and desperate. Help me. He attacked us. Her words at me like a slap. What? I roared, twisting against the officer's grip. You're lying. This is my house. She's sleeping with him. Sir, calm down, the officer snapped, tightening the cuffs. Lisa played the part perfectly, tears streaming down her face. He broke the door, she sobbed. He threatened us. I didn't know what to do. Don't you dare. I screamed, my voice cracking under the weight of betrayal. Tell them the truth, Lisa. You're the one. Enough. An officer barked, hauling me to my feet. We're taking you all in to sort this out. The night at the station was a blur. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and cold, as we were separated for questioning. I sat in the interrogation room, replaying every moment in my head, my frustration mounting with each passing minute. When my turn came, I told them everything, the cameras, the recordings, the betrayal that had unfolded in my own home. I knew how it sounded, but I didn't care. The truth was all I had left. Hours dragged by as the officers sifted through our statements. Eventually, it became clear that no real crimes had been committed, at least none they could act on. There was no assault, no theft, just a broken door and 3 people caught in a web of lies and betrayal. By the time we were released, the first light of dawn was breaking through the clouds. My body ached with exhaustion, but my mind raced. Lisa didn't say a word to me as we exited the station. She walked ahead, pulling out her phone and dialing a number. Moments later, a taxi pulled up. I watched in stunned silence as she climbed in, the man following close behind. They didn't look back as the car pulled away, disappearing into the early morning haze. I drove home in a daze, my thoughts churning with anger, humiliation, and an overwhelming sense of loss. The house was silent when I arrived, the broken door hanging awkwardly on its hinges. I stood in the wreckage of my life, unsure of what to do next. And then I remembered the recordings. My fingers trembled as I loaded the files onto my computer, the images and sounds of their betrayal playing back in vivid detail. Every kiss, every insult, every word that cut me deeper than a knife. I hesitated for only a moment before I hit upload. The videos went live on multiple platforms, a raw, unfiltered glimpse into the nightmare I'd been living. The response was immediate. Within hours, the clips went viral. Comments flooded in, some offering sympathy, others reveling in the drama. My phone buzzed incessantly with calls and messages, but I ignored them all. Friends, coworkers, even distant acquaintances. All of them had seen the videos, their curiosity outweighing their tact. It wasn't until my phone rang for the 10th time that I realized I hadn't eaten or slept. I didn't answer, didn't care to hear what anyone had to say. And then she came back. Lisa stormed up the driveway, her face flushed with rage. She screamed as she threw rocks at the house, her voice raw and venomous. "You ruined my life," she shrieked. "How dare you?" I opened the door, stepping onto the porch, my own anger flaring to meet hers. "I ruined your life?" I shouted back. "What about mine, Lisa? You destroyed everything. You'll regret this," she screamed, her voice breaking. Her words hung in the air as she turned and stalked away, leaving me standing there, shaking with fury. For the first time in days, the house was quiet. I sat in the wreckage of my living room, my head in my hands. Lisa's threats echoed in my mind, but I pushed them aside. She could scream, she could rage, but she couldn't undo what she'd done. The recordings were out there now, a permanent testament to her betrayal. And as much as it hurt, as much as it hollowed me out to relive it, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't the one who had anything to regret. The decision to leave came to me in the stillness of that shattered home, surrounded by fragments of a life I no longer recognized. Lisa's threats replayed in my mind, her voice filled with venom and fury, and I knew I couldn't stay. She was unpredictable, dangerous even. I couldn't risk her finding me again, not while I was still reeling, my emotions raw and unguarded. There was only one place I could go, a house I'd bought years ago, tucked away in the countryside. A secret I'd kept even from Lisa, known only to my parents. It had always been a backup plan, a sanctuary I thought I'd never need. Until now, I didn't tell anyone. I packed in silence, taking everything of value. My clothes, my personal keepsakes, and every precious thing I could carry, including gifts Lisa had given me over the years. They felt tainted now, but I couldn't leave them behind. Who knew what she'd do if she came back? The drive was long and quiet, the hum of the engine my only companion as the city faded in the rearview mirror. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. The house was just as I'd left it, simple, secluded, and untouched by the chaos of my life. When I arrived, I carried my things inside and dropped them in a heap by the door. Exhaustion weighed on me, and I collapsed onto the old couch, staring at the ceiling. The silence was deafening, but it gave me space to think. I replayed everything in my mind, from the first hints of betrayal to the moment I uploaded those recordings. The anger, the humiliation, the loss. It all came rushing back, a tide I couldn't escape. For the first week, I drank. Whiskey, vodka, beer, it didn't matter. Anything to dull the edges of the memories, to silence the voices in my head that questioned everything I'd done. The alcohol didn't help. Not really. It only made the nights longer and the mornings heavier. One night, I stumbled outside with a bottle in hand, the cold air sobering me just enough to see the mess I was becoming. I stood there, staring at the dark horizon, and realized something. Lisa wasn't destroying me anymore. I was doing it to myself. The next morning, I gathered everything valuable I'd brought with me. Jewelry, keepsakes, even the expensive gifts Lisa had given me over the years. I sold it all, every last piece. The money was enough to make a fresh start, and I knew exactly where I wanted to go. California. It had always been a dream of mine, a place I'd thought about in passing, but never seriously considered. Now it was my chance. A new life, a clean slate. The move was swift, almost impulsive. I found a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing flashy, but enough to feel like home. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. It didn't take long to meet her. Emma was nothing like Lisa. She was warm, kind, and genuine in a way that felt almost foreign to me. We met at a local bookstore, of all places. I was browsing aimlessly, killing time, when she struck up a conversation. "What do you think of this one?" she asked, holding up a novel with a bright cover. I blinked, caught off guard. I haven't read it," I admitted. "But I hear it's good." She smiled, the kind of smile that made you feel seen. "That's good enough for me." We talked for an hour, standing between the shelves, and before I knew it, I was asking her to coffee. Things moved quickly after that. Emma had a lightness about her, a quiet strength that drew me in. She didn't pry into my past, didn't push me to share more than I was ready for. She was simply there, present and real, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I found myself looking forward instead of back. We started dating, and life began to feel like it was mine again. The memories of Lisa still lingered, shadows that crept in during quiet moments, but they didn't consume me anymore. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Emma leaned her head on my shoulder. "You seem happier these days," she said softly. "I think I am," I replied, surprising myself with the truth in my words. The past hadn't vanished, but it no longer defined me. I was building something new, something better, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was